After the terrorist murder of a Catholic priest. As new footage of the attack emerges, thousands of police reservists sign up across the country after yesterday's killing of the elderly cleric at a church in Normandy. The Pope says the world is at war, although he insists it is not war of religion.
Also tonight, better economic figures than expected, but is it the last hurrah before the Brexit effect?
Smashing the glass ceiling, Hillary Clinton makes history as she's officially nominated by the Democrats.
And how a rather chilly craze that went viral led to a major scientific breakthrough.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale and Mark Austin.
Good evening. A huge operation to step up security across France is underway tonight in the wake of the terrorist murder of a priest in his church. Thousands of people have already volunteered to join police reservists after the attacks in Normandy and Nice, while extra anti-terror forces are also to be deployed. Today, Pope Francis said the world is at war, although he insisted it is not, as he said, a war of religion.
In Normandy itself, investigators have revealed more details about the attackers who killed the priest and held worshippers hostage. They believe they now know who the second terrorist was after finding an identity card. Our reporter Juliette Bremner is in the town of Saint-Étienne-du-Rouvray this evening. Juliette.
That's right. They have named the person they believe to be the second man who entered this church and brutally murdered an elderly priest. It's understood he was not known to security services, unlike his accomplice, Adel Kamish, who, of course, was known to them. And there are growing questions and anger about how a convicted terrorist who was supposed to be under house arrest was apparently allowed to roam these streets almost at will. The dramatic moments when police surround a church. Inside, a priest has been killed in a crime that has shaken France. A nun can be seen rushed to safety. Soon afterwards, the two killers will be shot dead as they leave the building. This should have been a point of unity. The steps of the town hall turned into a floral tribute to a much-loved parish priest. A day after 85-year-old Father Jacques Hamel was murdered, a community struggled to take in the senseless horror. Sebastian and Maria served with him in the church that they can just see from their balcony. He didn't have a bad word to say about anyone. He was just a good man, they told me. Even as people queued to remember his kindness, divisions over his murder were emerging. A banner criticising President Hollande and the lack of security was unfurled as I was broadcasting. As you can see now, people are actually trying to move this crowd on because they don't like them saying these things. A scuffle broke out as those who come to mourn objected, and police were forced to keep the two sides apart. Arriving in Poland, the Pope spoke in unusually blunt terms. The word that's being repeated often is insecurity, he said, but the real word is war. Let's recognise it. The world is in a state of war. There is anger that Adel Kamish, one of the men who killed the priest, wasn't kept in detention. This is the home where Adel Kamish was living with his parents under curfew following his release from prison. But he was allowed out unsupervised between 8:30 and midday every day. Enough time, we now know, to commit his dreadful crime. Police searching his home found an identity card that they believe belongs to the second man, named as 19-year-old Abdul Malik Petitjean. At a national security meeting in Paris, President Hollande and his government promised to double the number of security officers. Police are keeping a deliberately high profile, but with more than 10,000 people on the terror watch list, this alone can't end the violence. Juliette Bremner, ITV News, Saint-Étienne-du-Rouvray.
Here, the Chancellor Philip Hammond hailed today's better-than-expected economic figures as proof the UK is in good financial shape going into the Brexit process. Britain's economy grew by 0.6% in the 3 months before the EU referendum vote, but some experts say it could just be the last hurrah before the Brexit effect really kicks in. Our business editor, Joel Hills, reports.
We were warned that Brexit would send unemployment soaring, but at McDonald's, they're recruiting. £600 million is being spent overhauling restaurants. The British chief executive says he needs another 5,000 people. Did you not think twice about the investment you're making after the result of the referendum?
Well, I think Brexit caused anxiety for some of our customers and some of our people. And what we learned through the recession was that customers' demands of retail will get heightened post an event like Brexit, and when they're feeling more fragile in terms of their confidence in the economy, we need to step change and keep investing.
Elsewhere, the news was upbeat. Taylor Wimpey said demand for new homes is solid. The drug maker GSK announced increased investment in its British operations. We now know that in the 3 months to June, the British economy grew by a healthy-looking 0.6%. Output in services and industrial production rose. Manufacturing had its best performance in 17 years, although output in the construction sector fell, and the strongest growth was in April. It dropped away sharply in the run-up to the referendum. The new Chancellor insists the economy is fundamentally strong, but the department he now runs predicted Brexit would trigger job losses, a squeeze in living standards and a slump in house prices.
Our job now is to manage and mitigate those risks, to try to make sure that they don't crystallise. Where they inevitably do crystallise, to minimise the impact of them, and at the same time to start to seize the opportunities that leaving the European Union also offers.
Here in Preston, they worry that opportunity is slipping away. This company makes products to withstand disaster. Since Brexit, inquiries from abroad have fallen.
There's been some hesitation from the EU, particularly one contract, a €300,000 contract, and we're actively working on that. And now we're going over to Germany next week, end of next week, to try to jog them along.
The takeaway from today is actually pretty limited. It's too soon to assess the economic impact of Brexit. McDonald's breezed through the last downturn. There's some evidence another one looms.
So, Joel, the Bank of England makes its monthly decision on interest rates next week. Will that be influenced, do you think, by today's figures?
Only up to a point, because it's a history lesson that we got today, Mark. Essentially, it was an insight, a snapshot of how the British economy was doing in the run-up to the referendum. We know it was doing well. What we're interested in is what's happening here and now, and actually what happens next. And obviously, we have no sight of that yet, and we won't do for some time. And the Bank of England's been made very clear that it's worried that the uncertainty thrown up by the referendum, we still don't know what Brexit means, will trigger a response with households and businesses. People will sit on their hand, they'll stop spending, and that could have a potentially rather bad effect. I think then it's likely, as they've indicated, there will be further action to try and stave off a recession. I mean, look, the referendum has triggered an economic shock of scale as yet unknown. It is quite possible, we just don't know yet, that actually the gloom and doom won't come to pass, but it's too soon to say with any confidence that that's the case.
All right, Joel, thank you very much indeed.
Now, what was meant to be a big policy launch for the Labour leadership candidate Owen Smith today was instead overshadowed by a remark he made about the Prime Minister, Theresa May.
Yes, in an apparently impromptu aside, he spoke of wanting to smash her back on her heels, words he later apologised for using. Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp was at today's launch.
In the Labour leadership contest, this was Owen Smith's chance to lay down his marker in a big speech. Left-wing, check. Radical, yes. Policies, lots. But there was controversy too, depending on whether you think this comment about Theresa May was appropriate or not.
Theresa May even had the temerity, I don't know if you saw it, at PMQs to lecturing Labour on social injustice. And I'll be honest with you, it pained me that we didn't have the strength and the power and the vitality to smash her back on her heels.
Smashing Theresa May back on her heels was not in the script. Owen Smith had gone off-piste. But on Twitter came accusations of violent misogyny and sexism. So should he have taken more care?
There are some people on Twitter who thought you were being misogynistic when you said we should smash Theresa May back on her heels.
Well, perhaps it backfired, but we should have a bit of robust language in this politics, I think. But, don't ever think that I was implying for a second any suggestion of, any sort of physical smashing back of Mrs May or anybody else.
So was it an overreaction on social media by the politically correct brigade? We played his words to customers in a Rotherham department store just across the road from his speech.
Smash her back on her heels and argue that these
Aggressive.
are our values.
Aggressive?
Yeah.
I don't think those words would endear him to anybody, would they?
No, they wouldn't.
We've got to have robust language, and he's just taking the fight to Theresa May.
It doesn't... It's not very appealing.
Smash her back on her heels and argue that these are our values.
It's very aggressive, the wording and the action.
And to make his day worse, a Jeremy Corbyn supporter said goodbye to Mr Smith. You are not welcome, you are traitor. In a less than friendly way. Chris Ship, ITV News, Rotherham.
Theresa May continued her round of discussions with European Union leaders today by going to Italy. The talks covered similar ground to earlier trips in France and Germany, including the future of EU nationals in Britain. Our Europe editor James Mates is in Rome. So, James, did Mrs May make any progress today?
Well, that particular issue, EU nationals in Britain, is a big issue to the Italians. Of course, 600,000 Italians in the UK. And Mrs May was clear that everyone currently in the UK will be allowed to stay so long as Britons on the continent are given similar treatment. She said that's what she wants to happen. On the bigger issues, the Europeans are saying they won't negotiate with her properly until the UK triggers Article 50. But she's sounding them out and saying today that she doesn't want to get some deal like the Norway deal or the Canada deal. She thinks that Britain can and should get a bespoke deal. This is what she said in her press conference.
I think we should be developing the model that suits the United Kingdom and the European Union, not adopting necessarily a model that's on the shelf already, but saying what is going to work for the UK and what is going to work best for the European Union.
And James, the identity of one of the key people that Mrs May is going to be negotiating with in these upcoming negotiations was revealed today. What can you tell us about him?
Well, he's called Michel Barnier. He's French and he's a long-serving French official and former EU commissioner. And that's really the controversial point in that when he was commissioner, he was in charge of financial regulation and thus of the City of London at a crucial time just after the financial crash, and he was frequently in some conflict with the city. Now, this is therefore being taken as a signal, and it probably is exactly that Michel Barnier will be a tough negotiator. He's not afraid to take on British interests, and he understands exactly what's at stake for the city. But having said that, the big decisions being taken here are not going to be taken by the Commission or their negotiators. It's going to be Angela Merkel, François Hollande, or whoever's the next French president, Matteo Renzi here in Rome. Those are the ones on the big issues going to decide what Britain's relationship with the EU looks like.
OK, James Mates in Rome. Thank you.
Right, still to come on the ITV Evening News, the boxer with the famous sporting relative who's hoping for glory in Rio.
And how the Ice Bucket Challenge led to a major scientific breakthrough. Those stories and more after this short break. Join us then.
Welcome back. 2 weeks after Theresa May became Britain's second woman Prime Minister, Hillary Clinton has been making history of her own on the other side of the Atlantic. On a night when at least a show of unity returned to the Democratic Party, she became the first woman to be officially nominated as the presidential candidate of one of the major parties. We've just put the biggest crack in that glass ceiling yet, she said. Our correspondent Robert Moore reports from the convention in Philadelphia on Mrs. Clinton's breakthrough moment.
Are we ready to make some history?
Nearly a century after women won the right to vote in America, and a major party has officially nominated a woman as a presidential candidate. This was the historic roll call. 102-year-old Jerry Emmett announcing Arizona's tally.
Fifth 51 votes for the next president of the United States of America.
And then, to the tears and the distress of his passionately invested supporters, came the moment Bernie Sanders threw in the towel.
And I move that Hillary Clinton be selected as the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States.
Many women in this arena feared they would never live to see this day.
Is this the sound I'm hearing of shattering glass?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what you're hearing from all the women in this room who are supporting Hillary. Glass is breaking.
It means that I can be anything that I want to be in the United States because I'm a black woman. And that means that I've seen myself represented in this process totally.
The United States of America has caught up with the rest of the world.
But victory in November is far from guaranteed. So Democrats are deploying one of their big guns, the greatest advocate for Hillary of them all.
Bill Clinton did his very best to challenge the perception that his wife represents the establishment and the status quo.
For this time, Hillary is uniquely qualified to seize the opportunities and reduce the risk we face. And she is still the best darn change maker I have ever known.
With that shattering of the glass ceiling now part of the imagery, Mrs. Clinton appeared by video link with a message for a group of Americans who cannot even vote in November.
If there are any little girls out there who stayed up late to watch, let me just say, I may become the first woman president, but one of you is next.
Now both parties have their nominees, and the 100-day sprint to Election Day is underway. Robert Moore, ITV News, Philadelphia.
An investigation is underway after a 4-year-old boy died in a fire at a house in South Wales overnight. He has been named locally as Jack Davis. 2 other children, aged 3 and 4, were rescued from the house near Swansea.
Police investigating the attempted abduction of a serviceman from a Norfolk airbase have released e-fict images of the suspects. The 2 men, one armed with a knife, tried to seize the serviceman and bundle him into a car at RAF Marham last week.
And more than 250 Russian competitors have been cleared to take part in the Rio Olympics, despite the recent report alleging state-sponsored doping in Russia. The country's track and field athletes have already been barred from the Games. But exactly 4 years ago, almost to the hour, remember, it was the Olympic ideal that was uppermost in people's minds as the extraordinary opening ceremony of the London Games began to unfold.
And a similar moment is fast approaching again for Britain's Olympians, including one young boxer from Liverpool with a famous sporting relative. Our sports correspondent Ian Payne met Anthony Fowler for the latest in our series, Ready for Rio.
By knockout, Anthony the Machine Fowler.
He may still be an amateur, but Anthony Fowler has already got a handle. The Machine, as he's known, is one of Britain's best chances for a boxing medal in Rio. But he'd never have taken up the sport if it wasn't for a cocky classmate in Liverpool.
I was in class one day. I was just a very quiet kid in school, so I never intended to be a boxer, but a lot of my class used to always brag about he was a boxer and come on the gym, so I just went for it. But I didn't realise how much I wanted to win until I lost my first fight, and I remember crying. I was only 11, but I remember crying. And
really?
Yeah, and I just thought, whoa, why am I so down after this? And then after that, I never wanted to lose again, so I always worked very hard.
He didn't compete at the London Games, but in 2013 he won a bronze medal at the World Championships. Only injury stopped him going further. So he's got a great chance in Rio, according to his coach.
He always had good balance, he always had good timing, and he always had that little bit of spitefulness, just to go a little bit more, to do a little bit more than the others would do to get the win.
Fowler comes from a sporting family. His cousin's Robbie Fowler, the former Liverpool striker. Good footballer, but is he a good boxer?
I wouldn't say so, no. I don't think many footballers like getting punched.
Fowler's done it.
All Fowler's hard work finally paid off earlier this year, the relief obvious as he secured his place at Rio in a qualifying event. Britain has 12 boxers at the Olympics, their largest squad at a Games for 32 years. They're all amateurs, even though the sport's governing body announced professionals could also compete this summer. If self-belief makes a champion, Fowler's halfway to a medal already, and woe betide anyone who stands in his way. Ian Payne, ITV News.
And finally, when people talk about pouring cold water on an idea, it usually means they don't think that much of it. But it turned out today that the Ice Bucket Challenge, a stunt to raise money for medical research, was a very good idea indeed.
It certainly was. It went viral. Everybody for a while seemed to be drenching each other in icy water, and it has resulted in a major breakthrough in treating motor neurone disease. Sejal Karia reports.
I'm David Beckham.
Footballers did it. So did politicians.
And why not?
Even comedians were at it, along with the rest of us. The Ice Bucket Challenge was to raise money for people living with motor neurone disease. It was dismissed as a stunt, but it's now being hailed as a huge success, funding a major breakthrough into the condition. Susan Maguire is an author who was diagnosed with MND 12 years ago. She's thrilled.
Yesterday, I felt there was no hope. Today, I woke up to some hope, so I'm absolutely ecstatic.
Professor Stephen Hawking is arguably the most high-profile of the people with the disease, an incurable condition that attacks nerves in the brain and spine.
And then I'm going to add some of this material to it.
Thanks to the money raised by the Ice Bucket Challenge, scientists have for the first time identified 4 genes that contribute to the disease.
They've also revealed how the disease is structured genetically, and that means that we can specifically target therapies at that. We can make a personalised treatment. That's a really big breakthrough. It means that we're more than 1 step closer, we're 2 or 3 steps closer to finding an effective therapy.
The craze that's raised millions of pounds, and more importantly, hope for those living with the condition. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
That is really great that is how it ended.
I know, indeed, it's
Quite
fantastic.
something.
Yeah, brilliant. That's all for now. Raggy Omar will be here later with news at 10.
But from all the team here, have a very good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.